Abraham, you're going to have a son. Page 8, 6a. Al Kain Kara La Be'er Be'er Lachai Ro'i. She calls the place Be'er Lachai Ro'i. Years later, Isaac is born. Probably to ensure that Isaac would be the next patriarch, Hagar and Ishmael are cast out. Uriel Simon, the contemporary biblical scholar, calls this chapter Akedat Ishmael, the binding of Ishmael. And now, friends, 40 years pass, and Isaac is about ready to meet his wife, Rebekah. An important moment because that would guarantee that Isaac and not Ishmael would become the second patriarch. And the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that as Isaac was meeting Rebekah where he came from, look at B, V'yitzchak ba mibo be'er lachai ro'i. He comes from Ishmael in Hagar's place. I'd like to suggest the following. Isaac, perhaps feeling responsible for her expulsion, after all, it was done so he, Yitzchak, would be the next patriarch, tries to make amends 40 years later with Hagar. Look at the second box of B. Halach lehavi et Hagar, says the Midrash, ota sheyashva al ha'be'er va'amra l'chei elomim re'ei bel bani. Isaac had gone to bring Hagar, the one who had sat by the well and sought out God, saying, look at my misery. Or as the great Rashi says, Halach lahavi et Hagar l'Avraham avi sheyisa'ena. Isaac had gone to bring Hagar back to Abraham that he might take her again as his wife. He was doing tshuva 40 years later. Feeling responsible for this moment of marriage, as glorious as it was, the pathway was this expulsion, which he felt was wrongful. And so he goes to that space to say two words, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can we still be brothers? And when does this moment occur? When does he return from Lachai Ro'i? The language of the narrative is Yom Kippur language. The Torah says that he sees Rebekah. If you look at 6c, Vayetze Yitzchak, Lasuach Pasadeh, he goes out to meditate in the field. Says the Midrash, Darkan Shabale Tshuva Liyotzach V'Shafel. Lasuach is the language of repentance. It is the way of one who repents to be bowed and humble. And Isaac actually settles Vayeshev Yitzchak im Be'er Lachai Ro'i, which is of course a play on the word that is so often found in our liturgy on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Zachrenu L'chaim. Zachrenu L'chaim, remember us for life. It's never too late is an adage that is easier said than done. One must be self-forgiving. It often requires assistance of others. Third, it requires belief in the goodness of the person wronged, that he or she be forgiven. It's never too late. It's never too late to love, to grow, to dream, to fix mistakes. There we were, standing near his grave. Most of the time when you mourn a life that was, but when you lose an infant child, every day I think of not what was, but how old would Yitzchak Raphael have been today? What would he have been like? But that day, 40 years after his death, as we stood for the first time near his grave, Yitzchak Raphael was still 4 months old. We read the monument, Haben Yakirli, our precious child, Yitzchak Raphael. My dear wife, Toby, cleared the monument almost like she was making her infant son's bed. I whispered, I'm sorry I'm late. I love you. And in my heart and soul, I'm convinced that I heard Yitzchak say, it's okay, Abba. I love you too. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is also a time to talk about challenges facing Am Yisrael. And so if you turn to page 9, I'd like to talk about the greatest challenge facing Am Yisrael today. And that, I believe, is the challenge of keeping our nation united. And here are some reflections on that issue. 7a, Tanya, we learned in a Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Berosh Hashanah Yatsa Yosef Mibet HaAsurim. Not well known, but on Rosh Hashanah, Joseph came out of prison. It's referring to the Potiphar prison. He comes out ready to interpret Pharaoh's dream. What's the significance of his coming out of prison on Rosh Hashanah? So open your hearts. Breshit is a story of fragmented families. Think about it. Isaac inherits the covenant, Ishmael does not. Jacob becomes the third patriarch, Esau does not. Joseph and his brothers are in battle, in mortal battle. With the release of Yosef, a transformation takes place. We begin to move in Breshit from broken down families to families that are restored. Yosef pronounces, Ani Yosef, and soon all of the brothers are standing around Jacob's bed, and he receives the blessings. From a fragmented family, the family is reconstructed. Truth be told, there was never peace between the brothers and Joseph. While Yosef, when Jacob dies, for example, the brothers are quoted in the last chapter of Genesis saying, now that father is dead, we are no longer protected. Luyis Temenu, now Joseph's hatred is really going to come to the fore. While Yosef couldn't make full peace, maybe his children, led by Ephraim, his most important child, maybe he could make peace. That's why there's no tribe of Joseph. There's no tribe of Joseph, Rabbi David Silba argues, because you can only be a tribe if you can potentially make peace. Joseph couldn't make peace with his brothers, but there is a tribe of Menashe, and there is a tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim being the more important son covenantally, because they had the capacity to make peace. So Breshit ends with a powerful sense of unity. Yosef, Ephraim, and Judah are united. The Torah ends in this way. Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim is leading Judah and the children into Israel. That's the way the Torah ends. The prophets is a story, I believe, of the unraveling of this unity. The beginning of the end occurs when the kingdom splits. There's the kingdom of Judah, the son of Solomon, Rechavam. And the first king who splits off is none other than Yeravam, who comes from which tribe? He's an Ephrati. He comes from the tribe of Ephraim. And so this glowing moment of togetherness, Ephraim and Judah, breaks down with the destruction of that first temple. Now take a look, friends, at the way the early prophets end. Let's read this text. It's a text about the penultimate king of Judah, who had been taken prison to Babylonia, and after 37 years he's released from prison, and that takes place post the destruction of the temple. Vayidaber ito tovot vayitenet kiso me'al kisei hamlachim asher ito bebavel. And the Babylonian king set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon. When you read these words, is there any story that resonates? Vishina et bigdei kilo. This Babylonian king takes this penultimate king, Yehoiachin, takes him, he's the grandson of Yoshiyahu, takes him out of the prison, and he places him on some throne, and he changes his clothes. He's released, and the language is which language? The language at the end of Nevi'im Rishonim is the Yosef language. It's the language of Hisei, of throne. It's the language of clothes. Breshit ends with family intact. The prophets end in an opposite direction. Families shattered. Its final sentence is a challenge to return to the blueprint that ended Breshit, of Joseph being released from prison, starting the march towards family togetherness. Rosh Hashanah is the day of Joseph's release from prison, because Rosh Hashanah is a day of blasting the shofar and having all come together in the spirit of unity. And unity, as we all know, is not uniformity. Uniformity means that the way we deal with our differences is I eradicate your opinion. Unity means that we agree despite the fact that we disagree. It doesn't mean we agree on everything. It rather is the coming together of people of opposite opinions who are ready to listen to one another. Towards this end, I've actually drafted some rules of dissent. I don't believe that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a time to talk politics. There may be people here, honored people who have different opinions. It's a time to inspire, but it is a time to talk about unity. So politically, I would say to the political right in Israel, just remember that you have to recognize that the left doesn't love every inch of the land of Israel any less than you on the right love the land of Israel. And those on the left must similarly understand that you don't want peace any less than those on the right. There are political considerations, there are pragmatic considerations. But for me, unity means not to malign the views of the other. And on an interdenominational level, on a religious front, I would call for a moratorium on speaking negatively about the other. I do not allow any negativity to be said in a house of prayer, in a house of worship. If I want to build myself, I'm not going to push the other down. I'm going to build myself up. I have to recognize that I, as an Orthodox rabbi, I do not have a monopoly on passionately loving Am Yisrael, Torat Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael. And most important, I've got to recognize that I have so much to learn. Indeed, I have so grown from interaction with my conservative and reform and reconstructionist and renewal and all kinds of colleagues. It's said very well in C. This is the writings of Rav Yehuda Halevi, who talks about the power of communal prayer. And he says common prayer has many advantages. And what he basically says here, when I pray alone, I stand before God with all of my weaknesses. But if it's a community prayer, my weakness is your strength. Your weakness may be my strength. We are a whole collectivity community. I encourage you to read the words of Rabbi Soloveitchik in his understanding of Knesset Yisrael. I was in Gush Katif. I went to Gush Katif before the people in Gush Katif were taken out in 2005. I had strong opinions on the issue, but the reason I went was to do my share as an American rabbi to make sure that no soldier lifted a hand against a settler and no settler would lift a hand against a soldier. To do my small share to help bring about a sense of achdut, people with different opinions staying together. In Netzach Hazani, where I was, there had been a young man, Itamar Yefet, who had been killed in a terrorist attack. And I was there when his parents, Rachel and Bini, were taken out of their home. They were approached by a wonderful Sgan Aluf, a high-level soldier in the Israeli army, Sgan Aluf Lahav. And as they were ready to leave, Bini Yefet turns to the soldier and says, "My dear soldier, I never thought this moment would happen. Will you allow me one more moment? I want to take my two most prized possessions." And Be'inai Zachiti Lirot. He went into his home. What would we take if we had to take our two most important possessions? And he took the mezuzah off the wall, and then he took the Israeli flag that was just in the breeze up on his roof. He comes downstairs and he's walking, and then he turns to Sgan Aluf Lahav and he says, "You know, I don't know where I'm going. I'm afraid I'm going to lose these items. Can you do me a favor? I want to give them to you. And when I move into my new home, could you do me a favor? Would you be kind enough to come and you'll raise the flag and put up the mezuzah?" And these two men may have been on opposite political spectrums. They just fell on each other. And they cried. And this rabbi cried. I have a tefillah, the prayer of one of my favorites, Debbie Friedman's, my favorite song, which very few people know. She sings, "Gather around." Anyone know that? Gather around. This is Debbie, a blessed memory. Gather down by the river. Every day, right here, right now. One day, all over the world. Every day, right here, right now. One day, all over the world. Gather round, gather round, gather down by the river. Another talk related to the togetherness of Am Yisrael deals with silence. I love to sing at the pulpit, and you can sing it for yourself on page 11. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Thank you, because a vision softly creeping left its seed while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound. Now, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they're holidays of so many words in prayer and in Torah. But I think there's power to silence on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which relates to commitment and community. There are two kinds of silence, I believe, in Torah. One is the silence of shame, like the silence who saw the abuse in Penn State and did nothing. And then there is the silence of strength, like the moment of silence requested in London, in memory of the Munich 11. And in Hebrew, that word for silence is dimama. It's found in Tanakh. The silence of shame is found in the Purim story. If you look at page 10, 1a, Esther is hesitant to intercede on behalf of her people. Vayomer Mordechai lahashiva l'Esther, al tidami b'nafshech, which I understand, don't be silent in your soul. Don't be silent. This is the time to speak out. And then al tidami, from the word damama. And then there's the dama of strength in the Elijah story. You remember the story. Eliezer says to God he had been zealous. He had been very loud. And so God in B, Vayomer, God says, Tzei va'amarta b'ha lifnei Hashem. Go out and stand. V'nei Hashem ovev ruach gidolah. There'll be a strong wind. Lova ruach Adonai. God is not in the wind. God is not in the fire. God is not in the earth. Where is God? The second sentence. God is kol dimama daka. I believe Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is the day of that kol dimama daka. And so we blast the shofar, 2a on page 10. Uvishofar gadol yitaka. The great shofar is blasted. But what's heard? The kol dimama daka. The first time the word kol and shema are found in the Torah, and first times are always the headquarters of the meaning, is when the Torah says in the Garden of Eden, Vayitalech Hashem Elokim, and the Lord God went in the midst of the garden, Vayishme'u et kol Hashem Elokim mitalech b'toch hagan. And they, Adam and Eve, heard the kol, the voice of God, walking in the garden, walking. What was the sound? What was said? There was no sound. It was the sound of silence. Dr. Michael Fishbane, if you'll turn the page, speaks of the power of silence, which is preparatory to words. He's just magnificent. There are two kinds of silence. One of these is natural silence and is characterized by the silence of noise. It is a modulation, a diminishment, a negative valence. The other kind of silence is spiritual and is characterized by potentiality and anticipation. With respect to music, anticipatory silence helps prepare the self to hear sound sounding. I love that. I love that. There's the sounds of silence. What power. And then you begin. It's that Kol Nidre night. And then Rav Kook talks not about the power of silence before the words, but you read this through. This is just magnificent. The silence which is beyond the words, because the words are far too limiting. There are many interpretations to the sound of silence. I actually looked and tried to do a study of exactly what Paul Simon meant. He says he didn't know what he meant. But I offer my own shot. I think one of those paragraphs when he writes, I turn my collar to the cold and damp, I think that's the silence of acquiescence. I turned my collar and I walked away. But the last paragraph when he writes, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, I think that teaches us that holiness does not come from the neon lights. It comes from the simple folks representing the power of silence. I would sing this. I hope to sing this Yom Kippur Yizkor. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a... I turned my collar. He's turning away. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash. This is holy stuff. That split the night and touched sounds of silence. Now comes, I think, the silence of strength. And the people bowed and prayed. And the sign. Is gorgeous.
And the signs and words of the prophets are written on the subway.
Not in the neon lights, it's on the subway walls. That's the simple, powerful silence. Sound. I mean, everyone does it differently. Don't be afraid. I mean, when we speak, we not only speak with our mouth. I've given talks through song. I am contemplating on giving a talk through dance. I think there's power. I once gave a talk through silence. That probably was the best talk I've ever given. Works well. I've got 5 minutes, so just some very quick thoughts. Here's a thought on what I believe is the greatest blessing. The greatest blessing is to know you're blessed. The greatest blessing is to know you're blessed. Hagar, the reading of the first day, is near death. Vayifkach Elokim et neha. God opened her eyes. Vatera be'er mayim. Vayifkach, not patach, pakach. Vayifkach, she became a pikeach. She saw something that was always there. The water was always there. Second day, Vayisav ramat einav vayar v'nei ayil. He lifts up his face. And he sees a ram. I thought he was going with a lamb. A ram is pretty big. My teaching here is that ram, which you can't miss, he missed. It was always there. It was always there. Another quick thought, Yom Kippur night, Kol Nidre. I think the verb that jumps out of the page is yaleh, to go up. We say it in the psalm of that night. Mi yaleh bahar Hashem. Who will ascend the mountain of the Lord? The answer sometimes is in the question, who will ascend? The person who is ascending. Like the Rebbe who says to his students, there is a ladder with 50 rungs. One is on the 47th rung. The other is on the 25th rung. My students, who is higher? The students say, Rebbe, have you gone mad? Who's higher? Obviously, the person on the 47th rung is higher than the one on the 25th rung. To which the Rebbe says, Nein, mein Kinder, no, my children, it depends which way you're going. Depends which way you're going. One final generic thought. The first human question, I'm a student of first, is a question which Cain asked, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper? And interestingly, in the Bible, Hashomer achi anochi is not answered. Asks the question, but is no answer. Ah, friends, because the whole Torah is the answer. The way we lead our lives is the answer. And how can I stand before you without a story? And so here are 2 stories, and with this we close. This is a story about optimism. It's taken from the Parsha Parables anthology. I was touched by this story. It's about optimism. Back in the early 1950s, a large shoe consortium with stores across the United States and Canada decided to take their business venture into the emerging continent of Africa. They sent 2 of their salesmen to explore the prospects of business in the remote villages across the dark continent. After just 1 week, they received a cable from the first salesman. I am returning at once. No hope for business. Nobody here wears shoes. They did not hear from the second salesman for 4 weeks. Then one day an urgent cable arrived. Send 15,000 pairs of shoes at once. I have leased space in 5 locations. We'll open a chain of stores. This place is filled with opportunity. Nobody has shoes. I love it. One of my favorite. It's Yom Kippur night. Everybody's wishing each other a good year. And this wonderful, wonderful Alta Baba, could have been an Alta Zayda, walks up to the ark, opens the ark, looks in and says, "Dear God, everybody is wishing everybody else a good year. With what can I wish you? I want to bless you." And she goes through a whole series of potential blessings. She says, "God, mit was will ich benchen? With what can I bless you? Shall I bless you with long life? You give life. Should I bless you? You should make a parnasa. You shouldn't be affected by the recession. You give people the capacity to make a living. Should I bless you with good health? You are the Rofei Cholim. You are the one." She looks in, and with the wisdom, the great wisdom that we should really give to people who have the experience of life, she looks into the ark and says, "God, ich hab ein bracha, I have one blessing. Hab nachles von de Kinder." Thank you very much. It really is just such a wonderful spirit and a tremendous sense of chevroshaf that I feel, and wanted to really thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I wanted to also take this opportunity to invite one and all, if you're ever on the East Coast, to join us at our synagogue, which we call the Bayit, the house, the home. And please feel so very welcome to come on Shabbat, part of Shabbat. It would be our great, great honor and great pleasure. And in the same breath, please feel welcome to join us in Riverdale, to come into our Bet Midrash, into Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. As Judith was speaking this morning, and you spoke about some contacts with Chovevei students, you brought tears to my eyes. The students at Chovevei, they're not my sons, but they're like my sons. And I love them dearly. Rabbi Jason Weiner is here, who is the senior rabbi at Cedar Sinai and has done extraordinary, extraordinary work. And in so many ways, Jason and the others, Aaron Lerner, who now is going to be the Jim Joseph educator at UCLA, and many others, they have become my teachers. And something very important to me, separate and independent of Chovevei, Yeshivat Maharat, which is a school that trains women to become halachic decisors, who trains women to become spiritual leaders within the Orthodox community, whose dean is Sarah Horowitz, who serves on full-time on our rabbinic staff at the Bayit. I also welcome you to come and to visit Yeshivat Maharat. 3 women are going to graduate, God willing, this coming June, and will become full members of the clergy. It's a wonderful time for me personally and for these institutions. I did want to mention, although he's not here, my dear, dear friend, Rabbi Yosef Kinevsky, who is playing a critical role in the development of the International Rabbinic Fellowship, which is a group of now over 200 modern, what I call open Orthodox rabbis, for whom the spirit of pluralism, these kinds of organizations are so central. Rabbis from across the country, and I'm so grateful to Yosef for all that he has done. And again, I thank you for your kindness and for your welcome. It's hard for me to teach unless we first sing, and I thought that maybe it's a good idea. Song is really the gateway. So this is a wonderful nigun, well known, that was composed by Reb Shlomo, and please join me. למען אחי ורעי, למען אחי ורעי, אדברה נא, shalom. Because of our brothers and friends, because of our sisters and friends, please let me sing, please let me say, peace to you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best for you. This is the house of the Lord. I wish the best. So we need a little harmony. Shlomo used to say, what's the difference between heaven and hell? I mean, after all, in hell they also sing. And he would say, the difference is, but in heaven when you sing with harmony. That's the difference. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, As spiritual leaders, a term that I actually prefer, preparation for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur not only involves carefully crafting inspiring talks, but the greatest preparation involves to spiritually prepare ourselves. The key to inspiring others, the most important foundation, is to be inspired oneself. You can't inspire unless one is inspired. And that is what Chodesh Elul is about. Ein Kedusha b'li hachana, said Rabbi Soloveitchik. There's no holiness without preparation. And so in this second seminar, we'll try to offer some thoughts which may modestly help us in this preparation. We begin with an analysis of some of the goals of Tefillah. After all, we're going to be spending so much time in Tefillah on the Yamim Nora'im. If you'll turn, please, to page 13 in the handouts. There are two primary sources for prayer. The first is the position of Maimonides, who writes, it is an affirmative commandment to pray every day. Mitzvat aseh litpalel b'chol yom shene'emar, and now I'm in the third line, u'lo'avdo b'chol levavachem. Serve him, uppercase, serve God with all your hearts. Amru chachamim, the sages said, Ezohi avodah shebalev, what is the service of the heart? Zo tefillah. This is prayer. Now, while this term, le'avdo, we read it in last week's parsha, while le'avdo b'chol levavachem is normatively understood to mean to serve him, let's try to offer another suggestion. La'avdo could also mean to work with him. La'avdo may not be a compound of la'avod oto, but rather la'avod ito. It can be so vocalized. Dear colleagues, chaverim and chaverot, I draw your attention to the words in the Joseph story when the Torah says, V'lo yachlu dabro lishalom. The brothers could not speak with him in peace. So explains the Midrash. So says Rashi. Lidabro means lidaber, imo. It's not that la'avdo does not mean to serve him. It does mean la'avod oto. But there's a rainbow and there's an arch. And la'avod oto could arch into la'avod ito, to work with God. This then can have reference to the covenantal responsibility to partner with God, to bring tzedakah u'mishpat into this world, to do this with all of our hearts. Could that be the Maimonidean approach to prayer? Le'avdo, not only to serve him, but to work with God with all of our hearts, to work covenantally, to partner with God to redeem the Jewish people and ultimately to redeem the entire world. Samson Raphael Hirsch of the 19th century, Frankfurt am Main,